Okay, go. Okay, welcome. My name is Nicole Gillen, and tonight, today, this morning, wherever you are in the world watching this, is our inaugural webinar, podcast, whatever you want to call this thing. But it is really to shed light and hope and information around what it means to be in this community of serious mental illness. So I have affectionately called it 30-minute memoirs because none of us have time. None of us have hours and hours and hours of time to listen to stories that last all day or to read, unfortunately, sometimes books. And so to hear a snippet of information about someone's world and what it has meant to them, both as the person with this illness and their caregiver, that's what we're hoping to talk about. So, but before we get into all that, let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Nicole Gillen. I'm a former 35-year, I hate saying that, IT executive. Shows just how old I am. That about a year ago, I decided to write a book to help anyone in this complicated space of schizophrenia and serious mental illness. I did it because I have a daughter who suffers from schizophrenia. And when I saw what it did to her and how much I struggled to get my arms around how to best help her and how complicated everything was and how frustrating and how, it was like information was under rocks, but it was never in one place. That's why I went ahead and wrote this book. And my book addresses, I believe, everything that either as the person with the illness or a caregiver would need to know to help their loved one with this terrible illness. But honestly, today's not about my book. It's about this community, which is why I have Michael and Rob on the call, and I'm going to introduce them here in just 1 second. So I talked about this 30-minute memoir concept and wanting to open it up to the community to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of managing this disease and all the things that might need to be, discussed. So what do we hope to accomplish in 30 minutes? Well, number one is to shed light on the challenges, but also to show how resilient this community is. Secondly, to show the victories and moments of success, despite all these challenges. And that ultimately is to focus on one area as part of all the areas that someone might need to focus on. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen very quickly, just to give everyone an understanding of what that might look like in terms of the kinds of issues that someone might need to face. So, as I said, 30-minute memoirs in the world of schizophrenia. In terms of the issues, there are issues that whether you're at the very beginning of the journey, maybe it's something that's from an ongoing perspective. There are things that can happen at any time. There are areas in terms of getting the right support legally, financially, insurance-wise, things like that. And then there's long-term issues, estate planning and such. But today, with Rob and Michael, we're going to really focus on what's highlighted in purple, which is communication. And that involves doctors, family, friends. It also involves definitions. There's all these weird words that are part of our world, things like anosognosia, which unless you're in the world of schizophrenia, you'd not know what that is and why it's so important to understand it. So today we're going to focus on communication. But before we do that, I want to introduce Michael and Rob. So Rob is a freelance artist, and he and Michael live in Galveston with their cat Opal, who I am hoping makes a little drive-by during our webinar. Rob has schizoaffective disorder, and he tries to use art as his platform to bring about more awareness of mental illness. If you're on any of the many schizophrenia groups that are out there on Facebook, you've probably seen some of Rob's art. And if you haven't, you need to go to his gallery and check it out. Michael is his husband, and he's a team leader with Target. And he's going to school for his master's at the University of Houston, Clear Lake, which honestly, babe, working full time and getting your master's degree and maintaining a marriage, like, I don't know how you do it. I can't do it as a single person. But they've been together for 9 years. And this is when Michael became aware of mental health and serious mental health issues and what it means to be a partner of someone. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so I can see your lovely, handsome mugs. Um, and so we can really start to get into the conversation. And what I would like to do is I'm going to put myself on mute. And Rob, I want to start with you. And I want you to tell me your story. When did this start? What has happened over time? And then where have you landed today?
Well, uh, I always knew, even as a young boy, that something just was not right in my mind. I, at 15 years old, I was first put into a psychiatric ward, and they diagnosed me back then as manic depressive, put me on medicine. Um, my mom was not very consistent, though, on keeping me on the medicine, so that kind of went away. Um, as time has slowly progressed, my diagnosis has changed. Um, I would say probably in my 20s and my 30s is when the schizoaffective symptoms started surfacing, but I was still labeled bipolar. They were not treating me for schizoaffective disorder. Well, I had a major breakdown in my 30s, and it was a bad one. And a doctor finally diagnosed me as schizoaffective. And I was clueless. I didn't know what that meant. I'd only heard about schizophrenia, and that was scary to me because I didn't know anything about it. Um, but I am now current day. I have a great therapist who has actually explained to me how to handle my symptoms. I have a doctor that does listen to me and keeps close tabs on me. And I'm thankful that I have a husband and a close support system that really has helped me overcome a lot of the symptoms and a lot of the struggle. So that's kind of a real quick synopsis, but I just it took me a long time to get the right diagnosis,
Mhm.
and that was a little frustrating.
Yeah,
So,
I,
but
I, I honestly can't even begin to appreciate that frustration, because you know something's wrong. You don't know what it is. You don't know how to get footing underneath you so that you can live a productive life. And
exactly,
between doctors, I mean, and look, it's complicated. And doctors are doing their best, but many of them are not great at communications themselves. Many of them are just, well, try this. Well, what about that? And try this because they think that might be the path to go. But unfortunately, it's because of the complexity, it makes it very, very difficult. And then as the patient, as the person who is struggling with this, I can't even imagine what that means in terms of the weight on your own back that you have to carry to try and, put yourself on a healing journey.
well, I always felt like I'd see the doctor, he'd throw medicine at me and say, okay, talk to a caseworker. And then I was just kind of let to my own devices, and I never felt equipped. I was just banking on that he knew what he was talking about, and I took the medicine, but I never had any training on how to actually cope with the illness.
That's a really interesting word, training. And I want to pick on that thread in a minute. I'm going to throw it over to Michael here shortly, but it's that concept of arming the patient with information, helping them understand medically what's happening, from a treatment perspective, what's happening, what it means in the grand scheme of the disease, and this and that, and how you could how they could really have brought you into that bubble of information that I just think rarely happens,
I
sadly,
agree.
which
Agree.
then for the caregiver, Michael, I want you to tell your side of the story. Makes it even harder, right? Because you're not always with Rob in a doctor's appointment. You're not always there when things are happening. And now you're trying to like pick up the clues and figure out what you need to do. So talk about your journey from where it started and where you are today.
Well, so like at first it was, I didn't understand. I mean, I was never exposed to mental health. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or a generational thing. Like it wasn't talked about, it wasn't discussed. It wasn't until I had met Rob and he really opened my eyes to it. And at first I was like, well, Rob's got it, he's got it under control. But then it became, okay, it's not that easy for me just to let it go because there was no progress being made. So I became more involved. Taking time off from work, going to his doctor's appointments with him, asking questions that I needed to find out. Because sometimes he wouldn't have all the information. And so that's when I became aware of like, I need to be more present with him and more involved with his visits to the doctor. And then, just getting him on my insurance has been a huge, difference in, medication costs on top of that. Because it was really a drain on our finances. So I put him on my insurance. And that was really, great because then my insurance covers him and they give him so many sessions on the phone with mental health workers that my company provides for. And then, it became I don't want to tell him everything that's bothering me. The communication was breaking down because he had enough to deal with, but it wasn't fair to Rob for me not to share that with him. And so once I started opening up about like, hey, I'm struggling with this, that now, he became more aware, has been more of an active participant in our relationship, in our, involvement with our family and stuff like that. So that communication piece is just, it was necessary.
Yeah. And it's hard enough in any marriage, just communicating about day-to-day stuff. You layer on serious mental illness, and now all of a sudden it's even more of a tightrope in terms of, well, if he's having a bad day, do I talk about this? Or if he's having a good day, do I still talk about it because maybe it'll bring him down? And it's all the worries of wanting to communicate effectively, but also wanting to think about Rob and his needs and your own needs. And I can't even begin to understand how you guys manage this, but 9 years. I mean, honestly, you're killing it.
Well, and I think communication is the key. It is like the main key. I need to communicate to Michael when I'm having a rough time and I can't handle it on my own. And I want him to communicate with me when he's struggling with, hey, Rob, this is a little too much for me, or, so it's us talking back and forth is so important.
Yeah, it really is. Let's talk about family. I can speak from a personal perspective that talking about this illness with family is a tricky situation. And I know a lot of people struggle with bringing family members into this and having them be supportive in the right way and understand it and not make things even harder than they already are. Rob, talk about family.
Well, my family, they're a piece of work. They did not. I remember my dad told me that I was on my own, the family couldn't help. So I had no family support. Um, I was trying my best by going to doctors and, you know, talking to caseworkers on my own. It got really severe. I mean, I had a suicide attempt, the whole 9 yards.
Hmm.
And my family just, and even to this day, I don't think they don't support me like they probably should. But I am so lucky that I have Michael and his family because they've kind of taken me under their wing. And from my friends, from Mikey, from his family, I feel that support. I feel that family. So I guess I've kind of built my own family
Yeah.
because my biological family was just absent, you know?
Well, and what's interesting is I think if you just sort of put serious mental illness and schizophrenia to the side, and you think about so many people in this world who come from dysfunctional families, and they end up building their own family system amongst friends or whoever it might be. And so family doesn't have to be biological, right? family is what is close to your heart at the end of the day. And so,
Exactly.
Michael, your family, how did they adopt this, and how did they embrace Rob? How did that happen?
Well, I mean, at first I was very open with them, and because I think that awareness and normalizing it is a key piece of it.
Mhm.
There was concerns with all of my friends and family when I, you know, explained that Rob does suffer from mental health problems like schizophrenia. Was that, is he going to hurt you? I mean, it's always, for some reason I get that question first off the bat, and I'm like, no. I said, he's a big teddy bear. Like, he is just the sweetest guy ever. And that was always their first concern. And so once they meet Rob, they're like, oh yeah, you're right. He is just the greatest guy ever. And so instantly they fell in love with Rob. And like, anytime he needs someone to talk to, he will contact my mother or my brother. So they have, and it was weird because, like I said, growing up, nothing we had ever talked about. I'm not sure if, like I said, it's cultural or generational, but they really fell in love with Rob immediately. I mean, right away. And so I was really grateful for that. So I think if my family can evolve, everybody's family can evolve, because it just wasn't something we talked about or acknowledged. It was like, you just get over it and you move on with life, kind of thing. But they have accepted Rob and love Rob. They call him son. My brother calls him brother. He's always at family functions whenever we have him. So it was really great to see that. It's always what I always wanted to.
I mean, that is absolutely phenomenal. If you guys were to give advice to someone out there who's struggling with their biological family and they're looking to build that support system, what would that advice look like?
Oh wow. I think it would. First, I would tell them not to lose hope. I would say don't lose hope. There are people out there that really do care and really will love you regardless of your mental illness. And just be open to kind of, because for a long time I was scared to tell anybody I had mental illness for fear that they may not be my friend or not want to be around me. And
Right.
but if if you just overcome that fear and that fear, that stigma, there are really genuinely good people out there that will take you in and adopt you as their own. And I believe it is possible to form your own family. Like you said, it doesn't have to be biological, you know.
So it's interesting. Have you run into someone that when you said, I'm a schizophrenic, or Michael said, my husband is a schizophrenic, where someone's been like, oh, I'm out? Like, has that actually happened?
Um, there have been a few friends that I had
Hmm.
that my illness was not something they wanted to deal with, so they backed out.
Hmm.
Um, but I have the remainder of my friends or my true blue friends that they don't care if I'm, you know, having a horrible day or whatever. They're there for me, and they've proven that they're sticking by my side. So I'm not so afraid anymore of losing friends because I know if I lose them, then they weren't supposed to be there anyway.
Yeah.
So,
All right, Michael.
Um, I don't think, I think I'm very type of person where my friends are very close to me. And when I talk about my friends, it's very like, we've been friends for 30 plus years.
Wow.
And so I don't really cast that net out to a whole bunch of people.
Okay.
So the ones that I do have are, when they came to my wedding with Rob, they just fell in love with Rob. And I think they had met him maybe one time before that.
yeah,
Um,
one time.
so I don't really get that close to people. I'm very walls built up kind of person.
All right, that's beautiful. I gotta tell you, I mean, you guys are amazing. I love talking to you, and I love hearing about just the relationship you have and the community you've built around your relationship. It's special, it's unusual. As I said, it's unusual not just in this community, but it's unusual everywhere to have what you
Yeah.
guys have built. So I love that. So, all right, let me ask you this, Rob. When you were
Yes.
when you were at the age, let's say, when were you officially diagnosed with schizophrenia? You were 20s?
Oh no, it was, I think I was around 35.
Okay. When you were officially diagnosed at 35, what do you wish you really understood at that time?
I wish that I would have been given the instead of just saying, basically it seemed like the doctor said, okay, you're schizophrenic, you know, take this medicine and I'll see you in 3 weeks or whatever. I wish someone would have sat me down and said, okay, Rob, you're schizophrenic, explained what delusions and hallucinations were, explained some of the symptoms, the positive symptoms and the negative symptoms. I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah.
And really, I didn't know anything about that till I read your book about positive, negative symptoms. And that was something that I wish I would have known back then because I could have coped and battled back better. Because
Yeah.
I took my medicine and I saw a caseworker, but there was no coping skills. There was no, I mean, there was no help and support that I needed. So I wish that I would have had that back then.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's so sad. It's part of the problem with our medical care system where, there's the prescriber, there's the person who says, here's your pills. And there's a therapist who says, okay, let's talk about what's happening. But they're not coordinating amongst themselves, really, to say, okay, here's medication he's on. These are the kinds of things he needs to understand. These are the kinds of things, to be focused on when you're working with him. There's none of that. And when you're deep in the disease and you're trying to claw your way out, you can't articulate that. You can't go to your therapist and be like, right, so can we talk about my positive symptoms? It's just
Yeah.
not reality. And it's one of the things that just really kills me, because at the end of the day, it reduces poorer outcomes. It reduces diminished outcomes, because the person with the illness, it has a very difficult time trying to connect all those dots. You're just trying to live. You're trying to survive this horrible thing. And yet no
Survival
one's,
was that's a great word, survival. That's what
yeah.
I was trying to do.
And
Survive.
yet if they communicated better with each other and with you, those outcomes would all improve. And so
Yeah.
then, Michael, from a caregiver perspective, I know there's times you're with Rob, probably in appointments and things like that. But there's also times that you're probably thinking, holy smoke, wait, what? A concept, a diagnosis, something happens. And now all of a sudden you're trying to scramble to figure out what's happening, because no one's probably communicating with you very well either.
So like that happened when they put him on his last medicine, and it turned into like, do we really want to do that? Because it was blood work that had to be taken every week, and so it may affect his wider red blood cells. And so it was a lot of Googling, and it's like, okay, do we want to really go there just now? Like, let's see if we've exhausted all our resources, and then you get lost in a rabbit hole of what ifs, and then what else this causes that, interactions with other medicines. And so
Yeah.
finally, like, we decided to take the plunge and try it out. And so far it's been helpful. But yeah, you get lost in the Google and search engines and what works. And then I even looked at what's going on in England and that's what's going on with those research studies.
Well, and I'm sure there's also a lot of, uh-oh, I'm reading all these reviews and it sounds really scary, and is it really the right thing, or is it, and then you're reading other things that are saying it's the best thing ever, and oh my gosh, and so how do you know which end is up and how to really provide the best care for him? And if the doctor or therapist or whoever isn't arming you, Michael, as much as they're arming Rob with, right, here's the 3 sources you need to read. Here's some information that'll help you understand about side effects. Here's what this is going to mean in terms of the long run. Here's da 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 da, you like all of that sort of stuff. Instead of you having to figure it out on your own, I would imagine you guys would feel almost more at peace in
Well,
terms of where you're at and what you need to do.
yeah, I mean, it completely is overwhelming with every change of medicine. You never know how he's going to react or anybody because everybody's mind is different and
Yeah.
everybody reacts differently to medicine. And so that was the challenging part of not knowing. And then it takes like 4 to 6 weeks for it to have an effect. And so maybe we're not waiting long enough. Maybe we should wait another week. So it was just one of those things that was very, very challenging, frustrating, overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. All right. So I know we're starting to get close to that 25-ish minute mark. So what I want to do is as I start the wrap up process is I want a positive statement from each of you about not just maybe where you are, but about how you guys have either overcome the challenge of communication, how you are putting things in place for your own communication, anything that's sort of positive around that from your perspectives. So, Rob, why don't you go first?
I guess I'd want to say for anybody who either has schizophrenia or serious mental illness or is a caretaker, that there is hope. And I say that honestly because if I can find hope, anybody can. And I think with the right tools and support and education, I think that schizophrenia isn't as scary and ominous as what it can be when you don't have that information.
Yeah.
So for me, communication with my husband and my friends has been so vital, and just having that support system is healing to me. So I would say just don't give up. That would be what I would have to say.
All right. I love it. Michael?
I think for me, for the overcoming communication is just be open and honest. If it wasn't for, me just saying I've got to be open with Rob, we wouldn't have the progress that we've made in communicating with each other and him knowing what my needs are and trying to meet my needs. Um, because that was terrifying for me to throw more stuff onto him
Yeah.
and give that person more credit than you would think they deserve because he's handled it like a champ. And so, and if it wasn't for this man right here, he's been inspirational to me for everything that he's going through and still going day to day, marching on through. So this man has just been, life saving to me. Although he says I'm life saving to him, but he's been the one that saved me for real.
You guys are awesome. I feel like I say that all the time, but you guys are awesome. So and my positive statement will be, anyone watching this, look at these two. Look at these two beautiful souls that are finding their way through this terrible illness together as a couple and, doing all the things. So just thank you. Thank you for all that you guys do, even just for each other, because it is truly inspirational. So let me go ahead and close out. And I just want to say, anyone who's watched, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. For both of you, for Michael and Rob, thank you for sharing your stories, for sharing your ideas. And as I said, for being lights in such this dark space. In the body of the YouTube webinar, I'll have notes. So I'll have the link to Rob's gallery for anyone that wants to go look at that, as well as the link to my book if anyone wants to go take a peek at that, as well as my Facebook page. So that'll all be there. So I think that wraps us up for today. So you guys, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.